Hi everyone, welcome back to another bookmas video. I can't believe we're halfway because first of all, this is the 6th video, and second of all, we've got 6 more videos to go, which just seems really weird to me. But anyway, today I thought I would talk about my most anticipated releases of 2025. This is a bit awkward because there's a train at the bottom of the garden and I think it's stopping, so I think people are going to see that I'm filming myself. So this year, 2024, I read 5 out of 15 of my most anticipated releases according to my Goodreads shelf. So the 5 that I read were Blue Sisters by Coco Mellows, Mongrel by Hanako Footman, Graveyard Shift by ML Rio, Scrap by Carla Henkel, and Lucy Undyne by Kirsten White. And to be honest with you, they were all bangers. So I feel like I've got a good eye because I enjoyed all of them. And then the other 10 that I didn't get round to, I own 9 of them physically after buying Eliza Clark's recent collection. The only one I don't have is Spoiled Creatures by Amy Twigg, and if any of you guys have read it, please let me know if you think I would enjoy it and if it's worth me getting in the future. But the other books that I do own that I will get around to are Hard Copy, Private Right, Lost in the Garden, Lady Macbeth, Women and Children First, How Can I Help You, Intermezzo, and Little Rot. So I haven't read any of those, or She's Always Hungry, or Spoiled Creatures. So yeah, not actually doing too well this year, and to be honest with you, if I'd thought about this earlier, I would have done a whole bookmas video of trying to finish some of these before the end of the year. But anyway, so for 2025, I actually have 14 releases that I'm going to be talking about today, and by the end of the video, if you guys feel like I haven't mentioned one that you think I'd really like, or I've just missed a really obvious one, please let me know in the comments so I can add it to my list. I've got a list on Goodreads, so I will link that below so you guys can check them out if you want to add any of these books to your own Goodreads. So yeah, let's go ahead and start with the 2 books coming out in January. Starting this video with an Adrienne Young book just seems so fitting because she is definitely my new favourite author of the last year. After reading Spells for Forgotten and The Unmaking of June Farrow, 2 of my new favourite books, I feel like she has now become in the territory of an auto-buy author for me. So A Sea of Unspoken Things, coming out on 7th of January. It already feels really different because it's set in California, and I think her other 2 books are set more on the eastern side of the US. Anyway, so it's set in a rural town called Hawthorne, and we follow James in the wake of her twin brother's tragic death. So James is truly alone for the first time, and she ends up going to Hawthorne to kind of like settle her brother's affairs. And then while she's there, she kind of discovers a bunch of secrets about her brother, like secrets he's been keeping, and also uncovers the events of the day leading up to his death. So as always with Adrienne Young's books, I feel like this sounds incredibly mysterious. I have no doubt that it will have me like on the edge of my seat reeling like the other 2 did. So yeah, I can't wait to read this one. I feel like she definitely is now an author where as soon as another book by her comes out, like I will drop everything else to read that book. However, I actually haven't read her backlist, like the Fable series and the other duology she did. So if anybody's read those and thinks I'd like them, considering I like her standalones, let me know, because I have been eyeing them up at the bookshop every time I see them, but I just feel like they're very different to her other books that I do enjoy. So coming out at the tail end of January is The Lamb by Lucy Rose. I was initially intrigued by this one because of the cover. It is a debut novel, so this is one of the books on the list that I actually haven't read anything by that author previously, but I've pre-ordered it anyway. Like, I'm kind of taking a chance on it because it sounds so good. It kind of gives me a little bit Night Bitch by Rachel Yoder. It's a folk horror tale, and it's about a mother and a daughter who live in a cottage in the forest. The mother kind of like lures in these strange men, and then I think she eats them, but when one stranger arrives during a snowstorm, which is definitely one of my favorite tropes, the whole like snowstorm forced proximity thing. Anyway, so her daughter Margot, she has to confront the shifting dynamics in their mother-daughter relationship and kind of like stand on her own and like make her own decisions on what's morally right or not. So this actually kind of sounds to me like if in the story of Hansel and Gretel, the witch had a daughter and she decided that she wasn't morally okay with her mother's antics. That is genuinely exactly how it sounds to me. Okay, moving swiftly on to February, the only release coming out in February that I personally am super interested in, Hungerstone by Kat Dunn. So this is one of the only books on this list that I actually haven't pre-ordered. I have pre-ordered the vast majority of these books, but that's because I only just found out about it the other day. It's a retelling of Carmilla. So Carmilla is the original vampire story, and a lot of people think that it has major sapphic undertones, but in this book it's kind of like bringing that to the forefront. And we've got our character Lenore, who I think she's questioning whether she wants to win her husband back because they're having like some troubles, or whether she wants to pursue this kind of mysterious figure Carmilla. And what I really like the sound of about this book is that it's not actually like a modern retelling, so it's not set in modern day like a lot of the retellings I've been reading recently have been. It's set during the Industrial Revolution, So it just sounds like a little bit different, and it's been compared to S.T. Gibson, like basically perfect for fans of S.T. Gibson, and I will be talking about her a little bit later in this video. In March we have 2 releases. The first is Stag Dance by Tori Peters, and I actually am lucky enough to have received a proof copy of this book. But this book is comprised of 1 novella and then 3 short stories, and according to my friend Ross, who you should all follow on Instagram, he has like a bookstagram account. It's honestly second to none. Like his recommendations and his reviews are so thoughtful. I just think he's brilliant, so you guys should all follow him over there. I'll link him below. So he said that each story varies in genre, which is so interesting for a collection. Usually the collections I read are like horror collections, and they're all kind of along the same lines, but with this one there's speculative fiction, romance, horror, and even a western, which is very intriguing. I feel so lucky to have this book on my bookshelves already, considering this is coming out in March. So I just wanted to say thank you so much to Serpent's Tail for sending me this proof. I am definitely going to get to it before the publication date. So the other book coming out in March is coming out on the 18th, and that is Sunrise on the Reaping by Susanna Collins. I feel like this book obviously is on everybody's radar, but I still had to talk about it in this video. So this is her second prequel to the Hunger Games trilogy. We've already had A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which I was not interested in reading that much. I kind of considered it because the movie was coming out, but I didn't get round to it before then, and then I just watched the movie. I thought it was really enjoyable, but I really didn't like the pacing. Like I just did not believe the villain arc. I thought it was a good performance by the actor, but I just did not find it believable at all. So yeah, I don't know what the book is like in comparison to the movie, but if it's anything like that, then I'm not mad that I didn't read it. But with this one, it's Haymitch's Games. I didn't even need to hear anything else in order to put this on my list, but I did look into it, and it's going to be interesting because we already know that Haymitch won his games. Obviously he's in the kind of victor's village in District 12, and he coaches Katniss and Peter in their games. What I didn't know was that he was in the second quarter crowd, and that game's had twice the amount of tributes as usual. So it would have been Haymitch plus 3 other tributes from District 12 alone. So just think how many people he had to outsmart in order to win those games is crazy. So I feel like this is going to be a wild ride. When I was reading the original trilogy, I did really want to know more about Haymitch's past, so I'm already sold on this story. Like I already am really curious to know what Susanna Collins is gonna tell us about Haymitch's past. It's safe to say it's probably going to be quite heartbreaking considering the state we find Haymitch in at the beginning of the first book. I thought I was out of my Hunger Games phase, but I watched the movies again recently and I'm still there. Like I'm still enjoying it. So there are no releases in April that are like on my radar. I might have missed some, but there aren't any on my list. So moving on to May, another new kind of like tie into a book that I've already really enjoyed. So In One Golden Summer by Carly Fortune. This book follows the older brother from Every Summer After, which was a book that I read a couple of summers ago, and I was so surprised by this book. Like I love that book so much. I would definitely consider rereading it if I'm going to read this one. I won't say much because anything I say about this one might end up spoiling things that happened in the first book. But anyway, it will be a romance at the same lake. I think all the characters will be a bit older. I'm hopeful that this will be good, but I have heard mixed things about Carly Fortune's other books. I'm going to try not to have high hopes about this one, but yeah, I just hope because it's the same characters that I will love this book. A couple of my favourite authors are coming out with books in June, so starting with the 10th of June, this is one of the most exciting ones, Bury Our Bones in Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. So all we know about this one is that it's a queer love story following the desires and dreams of a trio of women, and it's set across 3 times across different countries spanning 5 centuries. Kind of reminiscent of Addie LaRue a little bit. V.E. Schwab herself has said, I often say that if Addie LaRue is a book about immortality and stubborn hope, this is a book about immortality and rage, about being trapped in a body, a time, a world, a place, that tries to tell you how to want, to love, to live. A book about hunger and grief, a book about want and need. I remember reading somewhere that after she wrote The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, she said she would never put that much of herself in a novel ever again. And then funnily enough, a few months later, this story kind of came to her and she ended up putting the same, if not more, of herself into this book, which was a surprise. I'm grateful because I loved Addie LaRue. I found out recently that the title actually came from a poem, and I'm going to read it because it's so gorgeous. Bury my bones in the midnight soil, plant them shallow and water them deep, and in my place will grow a feral rose, soft red petals hiding sharp white teeth. It's so beautiful and so eerie. So yeah, I feel like that's a little bit of a taste of what we can expect from the book. And then a couple days later in June, June 12th, we've got a Riley Sager book, and something a little bit different for him because I feel like it's still a thriller, but it seems to be more on the historical side. So it's set in the 1950s on a luxury overnight train from Philadelphia to Chicago. I feel like it's a fresh take on Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express. It's set all on a train and there's a murder, but it's kind of a bit different than that. So our protagonist Anna lures those responsible for her family's downfall onto the train to confront them. That's all she wants to do. These lights. But her plan is quickly derailed because one of the passengers ends up getting murdered, and Anna is then forced to hunt down the killer and also protect the people that she hates the most, because she is the one that wants to, oh there it is, she is the one that wants to destroy them herself. Like, she doesn't want someone else coming and murdering them. So yeah, it just sounds so good, like so different. I love Riley Sager. I need to read more of his backlist before I get to this one. But yeah, I don't know how I'm gonna wait half a year to get my hands on some of these, because this is like, we're into June now. That is so long away. Okay, let's talk about July. Probably my favourite ever horror author next, Caitlin Starling. So you might have heard her name from The Death of Jane Lawrence. I did like that one a lot, but better than that one was The Luminous Dead. I really recommend you guys read that one because it is the best sci-fi horror. If anything, The Death of Jane Lawrence was a little bit of a letdown because I love that one so much and I read it so long ago, and I'm just so excited for this next book by her. It sounds insane actually. So The Starving Saints is a medieval horror following 3 women in a besieged castle that descends into madness under the spell of a mysterious godlike visitor. I've seen mentions of cannibalism in a couple of the reviews. I feel like that's made me both extremely terrified but also really fascinated. Yeah, I just love all these like historical books we've got on this list, like medieval horror. Sounds great to me. Like I said, because we're waiting ages for this one, this is July now, please read The Luminous Dead in the meantime. That is one of my top recommendations. I don't know why I haven't talked about it more on this channel. And then in the last day of July, I'm getting my absolute wish granted. We are getting a sequel to Hollow, my favourite ever graphic novel. So this one's called Hollow, The Woman in White, and it follows a new Washington Irving legend, The Woman in White, if you hadn't guessed it. But we're following the same cast of characters in the same town, Sleepy Hollow in upstate New York. I love those characters and I would read anything that included those characters. There is no cover for this one unfortunately, but I have already pre-ordered it nonetheless because I am so excited for this one. Now moving on to August. So we've got Hemlock and Silver on the list because I really would love to read another fairy tale like story from T. Kingfisher, and this one's a reimagining of Snow White. The only book that I've read before by this author was The Seventh Bride, which I think was a retelling of the story of Bluebeard or Blackbeard, Bluebeard or Blackbeard. Blue Blazer, Black Blazer. Anyway, in that one we followed a young girl who was forced into a marriage with a lord, and then when she gets to his castle she finds out that he had 6 other wives before her and they're all imprisoned in this castle, and it's like an enchanted castle, so it's really interesting. It plays for time. That was the most rogue find. I think it was on Kindle Unlimited or something and I read it during a readathon last year I want to say, but it made a massive impression on me and I've wanted to read a fairy tale retelling by T. Kingfisher ever since. I've just been craving one of these so much, so I'm really excited to read this. I think it will probably be one that I read next autumn since it's coming out at the end of August. And then probably even more exciting than that, we've got an R.F. Kuang coming out on the 28th of August. So we know that Babel was set at Oxford University, but R. Kuang also studied at Cambridge, and that is where her next novel Catabasis is set, as well as the underworld. The word Catabasis, I don't know if I'm saying it right, but it literally translates to the story of a hero's descent into the underworld in ancient Greece. I read the first chapter of this one a while back, and it's basically about our protagonist who accidentally sends her professor to hell. So her and a rival student end up going down into hell together to retrieve him, I think in order to get their own letters of recommendation. So it's like purely selfish reasons for them doing it and like getting him back. I think I'm not making this up, like this is what I remember anyway, but I just find it so funny that they would go so far just to like get ahead in academia. Like I love that. I think out of all of the author's works I like the sound of this one most, just purely based on the premise. So yeah, I really hope it lives up to my expectations, but it just sounds so good. Okay, we're down to our last couple of books here, one for September and one for October. There are so many hotly anticipated releases of 2025 and this next one is up there. It's called Hot Wax and it's by Emma Rio. We really don't know much about Hot Wax, but from what I've gathered it's a twist-laden thriller set against the backdrop of 90s rock, which feels extremely different from If We Were Villains and Graveyard Shift, which are very much kind of dark academia coded. Anyway, the plot follows a band of misfits on a tour that should have catapulted them to superstardom but instead came crashing down. So it's kind of also giving a little bit like Daisy Jones and the Six, but it's probably going to be a bit darker than that. I have promised myself that I will read If We Were Villains before this one comes out. I'm supposed to be reading it this month, so hopefully that happens. And our last book on the list comes out on October 7th. Until now I I haven't read any of S.T. Gibson's other books other than A Dowry of Blood, which is incredibly weird because that is one of my favourite books of all time. But Savage Blooms is the first of her newer releases that I really gravitate towards. It's described as a Celtic inspired erotic fantasy, and the author has said their inspiration comes from a lot of places, including Wuthering Heights, Labyrinth, the Rocky Horror Picture Show, Sierra Simone's Thornchapel series, and Rice's Sleeping Beauty Quartet, the Heron's Journey to the Underworld, and the Arthurian Quest for the Grail. So many inspirations there. So Savage Blooms is the start of a new trilogy with our main characters Adam and Nicola getting stranded in the middle of a storm at an infamous house named Eileen, which the house has a name. Amazing. As I said earlier, I love a plot where characters are snowed in and can't leave and something dangerous happens. That trope will genuinely never get old. So that concludes my most anticipated releases of 2025. Like I said earlier, if you guys like the sound of any of those, I will leave the link to my Goodreads shelf with all of those below. But also feel free to tell me any of your anticipated releases so I can grow my list. I'm so excited. Like, next year just feels so fresh to me in terms of new releases. Like, this year I thought was really good, but next year so many of my favourite authors are releasing books next year and I just couldn't be more excited. I hope you guys have enjoyed chatting with me about all of these books, and I will see you very soon with another Bookmas video. Bye!